Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. Colonel Dari, you know that in the operations of the army, I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, the operations of the army, it would seem to suggest to me, for instance, that there is a process involved in withdrawing troops. In Afghanistan, for instance, the American government did withdraw troops from Afghanistan, but not total withdrawal. There was a phase-by-phase withdrawal. So how can we situate that example and what has happened in Dapchi, whereby the army were completely removed from their checkpoints? Is that the way to go? Is that the way the army operates?
Well, Jimba, you recall I said that as far as I'm concerned, there's need to investigate this withdrawal. There's need to investigate this withdrawal because you cannot rule out completely some conspiracy here. Because even in the past, the army has had to look inwards to discover that there could be some fifth columnists even amongst them.
Is it an army conspiracy?
I'm not saying it's an army conspiracy. The army is not on its own. The government directs the army. So what I can say for now is there should be an investigation.
Okay, let's toss over to Abuja. Ajiri has a question as well. Ajiri.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Gimba. Colonel, what I want to ask is, looking at the timeline of events, immediately this abduction occurs. We hear from the spokesperson of the local police command saying that, look, we don't know the number of people taken from this place, and really kind of bringing into question so many things that we had heard. Immediately thereafter, we hear the Yobe state government quoting a military source as saying a large quantum of the girls had been returned, only for the Yobe state government to come around the next day and retract that statement, that it was false information. Now, fast forward a bit, we now see that the Nigerian army has said that they had to relocate their armament from their battalion from Dapchi to the Nigerian border where there was an incident in Kanama. And that they left the security architecture in the hands of that local police division. Now the police comes out and again refutes and says that, look, that's not true, that there was no notification of this withdrawal of the army troops, and that this is completely a lie. What I want to ask you, Colonel, in view of all of that, is we have seen communication lapse after communication lapse after communication lapse, not just in the Northeast, but also in places like Benue, between institutions. And at what point who do you attribute this to? Ultimately, who takes responsibility for all of this, with these kinds of communication lapses exacerbating the pains that the parents of these Dapchi girls are now feeling?
Yeah, I understand your question very well, and my take on it is that this is rather unfortunate because for the military, there should be one voice. And that voice is that of the military spokesperson. And before statements on sensitive incidents such as this is made, there must be in-depth reasoning and investigation. Because whatever you say, you'll be held accountable. Okay? And on this particular incident, like I said earlier, there's need to investigate. Normally, it's an IS, internal security situation. Once there's stability and there's no military location permanently there, the normal thing to do, or the right thing to do, is for the military to hand over to the police, who are in charge of internal security. They are saddled with the responsibility. But here we are. Part of the investigation will unravel whether there was proper handing and taking over. And if there's not, then somebody must pay for it so that lessons can be learned. Because whether we like it or not, we will have more of this, we'll have incidents or challenges coming up here and there. So, but the bottom line is that there should be an investigation into this incident since we've started passing the buck. So that is just my...
Colonel,
yes.
Colonel, I just want to come in here because you've mentioned, of course, about potentially investigating this particular incident, but what I'm referring to is something that's a bit larger in scope. We've seen this as a trend now developing across regions of the country. This lack of, this seeming institutional incoherence, this incoherence in what people are saying. Now, some people are saying that, look, ultimately, the chief executive officer of this nation, who oversees all of these various institutions, has a responsibility to ensure that the information that's getting to the public is truthful, it's on time, and it's correct. And we haven't seen that. So I want to ask you, if this has been a trend developing across theaters of conflict, at what point do we now say that, look, there's a lack of discipline within the corridors of power here?
Well, institutions must, for example, just like you rightly cited now, it is not the responsibility, say, for instance, of maybe the head of state as a chief executive to help the various institutions do their job. People are saddled with responsibility. Say, for instance, there is somebody in charge of the military, there is someone in charge of the police, and let those people who are responsible be called to order. They should, be held accountable for these identified lapses. Okay? I do agree with you. We've had, people not coming out to speak with one voice in institutions, for example, and that is not sending a good signal to the citizens, especially at this point in time, even where people are are already grieving because they don't know what is happening to their loved ones. It could be anybody.